They say you never forget the moment your life changes forever. For me, that moment came on a random Tuesday evening, wrapped in the scent of burnt garlic bread and the sound of my roommate's laughter echoing through our tiny apartment. I didn't know it then. That night would mark the beginning of something I'd spent my whole life searching for, something never expected to find in the person sleeping just down the hall. My name is Alex, and this is the story of how unexpected moments with my roommate turned into the kind of love that changes everything. The apartment listing had been almost too good to be true. Spacious two-bedroom in the heart of the city, affordable rent, LGBTQ friendly, seeking clean, respectful roommate. After 3 years of living in a shoebox studio where I could barely stretch my arms without touching both walls, the thought of having actual space felt like winning the lottery. I remember the day I first met Ethan. September air carried that particular crispness that makes you believe in new beginnings. And I'd arrived at the apartment building with 2 suitcases, a duffel bag, and a heart full of cautious optimism. The building was one of those renovated brownstones that somehow managed to hold on to its historic charm while embracing modern convenience, much like the city itself. When Ethan opened the door, I was struck first by his smile. It wasn't one of those polite, obligatory smiles you give strangers. It was genuine, reaching all the way to his hazel eyes, crinkling the corners in a way that suggested he smiled often and meant it every time. "You must be Alex," he said, stepping aside to let me in. "Welcome home." Home? The word felt foreign and familiar all at once. Ethan was 28, 2 years older than me, with an easygoing demeanor that immediately put me at ease. He had dark hair that perpetually looked like he'd just run his fingers through it, a lean build that suggested he took care of himself without obsessing over it, and a presence that filled the room without overwhelming it. He wore a faded band t-shirt and jeans that had clearly been through countless wash cycles. Comfortable in that effortless way some people just are. "Let me give you the tour," he offered, and I followed him through the apartment that would become the backdrop to the most transformative chapter of my life. The space was everything the listing had promised and more. Hardwood floors gleamed in the afternoon light streaming through large windows. The living room was cozy without feeling cramped, decorated with an eclectic mix of furniture that suggested personality rather than a Pinterest board. Bookshelves lined one wall, packed with everything from classic literature to graphic novels. And a guitar rested in the corner, well-loved and frequently played. Judging by its position, "This is you," Ethan said, opening the door to what would be my bedroom. The room was painted a soft sage green, empty except for a bare mattress and frame, waiting to be filled with my life, my things, my story. "It's perfect," I said, and I meant it. "Bathroom's there," he continued, pointing down the short hallway. "We'll share, but I'm pretty low maintenance. The kitchen's back this way, fair warning. I love to cook, but I'm still learning. So there might be some trial and error involved." I laughed, already feeling the knot of anxiety that had lived in my chest for weeks beginning to loosen. "I can't cook to save my life, so anything you make will probably be better than my usual diet of takeout and cereal. We'll balance each other out then," Ethan said with that smile again. And something in my stomach fluttered. I dismissed it as relief at finding a living situation that didn't feel like a compromise. That first evening, we sat on the couch with Chinese takeout containers spread across the coffee table, getting to know each other the way new roommates do, sharing the safe stories, the surface-level information that lets you coexist without fully revealing yourself. Ethan worked as a graphic designer for a small creative agency, he told me. He'd moved to the city 5 years ago from a small town in Oregon, chasing dreams that were still in progress. He loved live music, terrible horror movies, and rainy Sunday mornings. He was out, comfortably and completely, in a way I was still learning to be. I shared my own story, recently hired as a junior editor at a publishing house, a lifelong bookworm who'd always felt more comfortable with fictional characters than real people. Still figuring out who I was and who I wanted to become, I'd come out to my family 2 years ago, a conversation that had gone better than expected but had still left certain cracks in relationships I was trying to mend. "New beginnings," Ethan said, raising his beer bottle. "To new beginnings," I echoed, clinking my bottle against his. Unaware that I was toasting to so much more than just a new living arrangement, the first few weeks of living with Ethan passed in a comfortable blur of establishing routines and discovering rhythms. I learned that he was an early riser, often up before sunrise, drinking coffee on the small balcony overlooking the street while sketching in a worn leather notebook. I was a night owl, my best work happening after the world quieted down, words flowing more freely in the silent hours. We moved around each other like dancers learning new choreography, respectful of space and boundaries, considerate in the small ways that make cohabitation work. He always made enough coffee for both of us. I made sure to keep the living room picked up since he used it as his secondary workspace. Small gestures that built the foundation of something I couldn't yet name. I'd catch myself noticing things about him. The way he hummed while he cooked, usually songs I didn't recognize, but that became familiar through repetition. How he always kicked off his shoes the moment he walked through the door, leaving them haphazardly by the entrance, a detail that was somehow endearing rather than annoying. The concentration on his face when he was working on a design, lower lip caught between his teeth, completely absorbed in his creative world. These observations felt normal. The natural result of sharing space with another person? That's what I told myself anyway. One Friday evening, about a month after I'd moved in, Ethan knocked on my bedroom door. I was sprawled across my bed, laptop balanced on my knees, working through a manuscript that needed editing by Monday. "Some friends are coming over tomorrow night," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "Just a casual thing. Drinks, music, good people. You should join us. I mean, only if you want to. No pressure." The old Alex, the one who'd spent most of his early 20s hiding behind books and excuses, would have declined politely, invented some prior commitment, or claimed exhaustion. But something about Ethan's invitation, the genuine hopefulness in his expression, made me want to say yes. "I'd like that," I said, surprised by how much I meant it. His face lit up. "Great, you'll like them, I think. They're my chosen family, you know?" I did know. The concept of chosen family resonated deeply, especially for those of us in the LGBTQ+ community who'd had to build our own support systems, create our own sense of belonging in a world that didn't always make space for us. The next evening, I changed outfits 3 times before settling on jeans and a casual button-down, then felt ridiculous for caring so much about what I wore to a casual gathering in my own apartment. When the doorbell rang, my stomach tightened with the familiar anxiety of social situations. But Ethan's friends were exactly as he'd described, warm, welcoming, the kind of people who made you feel included within minutes. There was Marcus and James, a couple who'd been together for 6 years and bickered like an old married couple in the most endearing way. Sophie, a fierce artist with bright purple hair and a laugh that could fill a room. Diego, a quiet photographer who spoke in thoughtful pauses and captured moments with his eyes before his camera ever did. The apartment filled with laughter, music and conversation that ranged from silly to serious and back again. Someone told an embarrassing story about Ethan from college involving a mistaken identity and a drag show, and I watched him laugh at himself, completely comfortable, completely free. "He's special, isn't he?" Sophie said quietly, appearing beside me as I stood by the window, watching Ethan animatedly tell a story with his whole body, hands gesturing wildly. I looked at her, caught off guard. "What, Ethan?" she said, smiling knowingly. "He has this way of making everyone feel seen. It's a rare quality." "He's a good roommate," I said, and even to my own ears. The words felt inadequate. Sophie's smile widened, but she didn't push. "He is, and he seems really happy you're here. He told us he had a good feeling about you from the start." Before I could process that information, Marcus called us over to settle a heated debate about the best decade for music, and the moment passed. But Sophie's words lingered, planting a seed I wasn't ready to examine. If I had to pinpoint when things started to shift, when my feelings for Ethan began to transform from friendly appreciation into something deeper and more complicated, it would be the night of the burnt garlic bread. It was a Tuesday, unremarkable in every way except for what it would come to mean. I'd had a brutal day at work. My boss had torn apart an editorial pitch I'd spent weeks developing, and I'd come home feeling defeated and questioning my career choices. Ethan was in the kitchen when I walked in, surrounded by what could only be described as culinary chaos. Every pot seemed to be in use, the counter was covered in ingredients, and smoke was rising from the oven. "Don't ask," he said, yanking open the oven door and pulling out a tray of what might have once been garlic bread but now resembled charcoal. "I was trying to impress you with my cooking skills, and instead I've created evidence that I should never be left unsupervised in a kitchen." Despite my terrible mood, I laughed. Actually laughed, the kind that comes from your belly and releases the tension you've been carrying all day. "What were you making?" I asked, moving closer to survey the damage. "It was supposed to be homemade pasta with garlic bread," he said ruefully. "I found this recipe online that looks simple, but apparently simple is relative. The pasta is salvageable, but the bread is a lost cause." "Why were you trying to impress me?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. Ethan paused, his back to me as he scraped the burnt bread into the trash. When he turned around, there was something vulnerable in his expression, something I hadn't seen before. "You seemed stressed lately," he said. "I thought a home-cooked meal might help. Plus, you're always eating cereal for dinner, and I worry about your nutritional intake." The simple kindness of it, the thoughtfulness, hit me square in the chest. Here was someone who'd noticed I was stressed, who'd tried to do something nice for me. Who worried about whether I was eating properly? "That's really sweet," I said, and my voice came out softer than intended. We stood there in the smoky kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of his failed culinary adventure, and something in the air between us shifted. It was subtle, like a change in atmospheric pressure before a storm, barely noticeable, but fundamentally altering. "Tell you what," I said, breaking the moment. "Let's salvage the pasta, order some actually edible garlic bread. You can tell me about your day while I tell you about my disaster of a boss." His smile returned, grateful and warm. "Deal." We ended up on the couch, bowls of surprisingly decent pasta balanced on our laps, sharing the kind of conversation that goes deeper than surface pleasantries. Ethan told me about a difficult client who couldn't articulate what they wanted, but knew they didn't like anything he designed. I told him about my boss, about feeling inadequate, about the imposter syndrome that constantly whispered I didn't belong in publishing. "You belong exactly where you are," Ethan said with such conviction that I almost believed him. "Your boss sounds like someone who's threatened by talent. That says everything about them and nothing about you." "You don't know that I'm talented," I pointed out. "Yes, I do. I've seen those notebooks you leave around, the ones filled with your own writing. I haven't read them," he added quickly, "but I can tell from the way you hold them, the way you protect them, that what's inside matters. That's the mark of a real writer." No one had ever said anything like that to me before. My throat tightened with emotion I wasn't prepared to feel. We talked until the early hours of the morning. The kind of conversation where time becomes irrelevant, where you forget to check your phone or worry about work the next day. We talked about dreams and fears, about growing up different in small towns that didn't always understand, about finding yourself in a big city that offered both anonymity and opportunity. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, I realized I'd unconsciously shifted closer to him on the couch. Our shoulders were nearly touching, and I could smell his calling something woodsy and warm that I'd started to associate with home. "I should probably get to bed," I said reluctantly. "Me too," Ethan agreed. But neither of us moved. Finally, he stood, stretching his arms above his head, his shirt riding up slightly to reveal a strip of toned stomach. I forced myself to look away, suddenly aware of thoughts I'd been carefully not having. "Thanks for tonight," I said. "For the failed garlic bread and the successful conversation," he grinned. "Anytime. Maybe next time I'll actually succeed at the cooking part." As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't deny it anymore. What I felt for Ethan was more than roommate appreciation, more than friendship. It was attraction, interest, the beginning of something that terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. And I had absolutely no idea what to do about it. Once I acknowledged my feelings, even just to myself, they became impossible to ignore. Suddenly, every interaction with Ethan carried new weight, new meaning. The casual touches as we passed in the hallway felt electric. His laughter made my heart beat faster. The sight of him fresh from the shower, hair damp, and skin flushed, created thoughts I had no business thinking about my roommate. I tried to be subtle, to maintain the easy friendship we developed, but I felt increasingly transparent. Surely he could see it, the way my eyes lingered a moment too long, the way I found excuses to be in whatever room he occupied, the way I hung on his words like they contained secrets to the universe. But if Ethan noticed, he gave no indication. He remained his usual warm, friendly self. I couldn't decide if I was grateful or disappointed. I threw myself into work, trying to create distance and perspective. I spent longer hours at the office, came home exhausted, and retreated to my room like a hermit. If Ethan wondered about my sudden unavailability, he didn't press, though I sometimes caught him looking at me with concern. About 2 weeks into my attempted avoidance strategy, Ethan cornered me in the kitchen on a Saturday morning. "Are you okay?" He asked directly. "You've been weird lately, distant. Did I do something to upset you?" The genuine worry in his voice made me feel guilty. Here I was, creating problems where none existed, pulling away from someone who'd been nothing but kind to me. "No, you didn't do anything," I assured him quickly. "I've just been stressed with work. I didn't mean to be distant." He studied me for a moment, and I had the uncomfortable feeling he could see right through my flimsy excuse. But he didn't push. "Okay," he said finally. "But you know you can talk to me, right?" "About anything?" "Anything except this," I thought. "Anything except the fact that I'm falling for you and have no idea if you could ever feel the same way."
"I know,"
I said aloud. "Thank you," he smiled, seemingly satisfied, and the moment passed. But something had shifted again, another subtle rearrangement of the pieces between us. That evening, Sophie texted me out of the blue. "Coffee tomorrow?" "Just us?" I'd exchanged numbers with Ethan's friends after the gathering, but we hadn't hung out one-on-one. Curious and slightly nervous, I agreed. We met at a cozy cafe in a neighborhood known for its LGBTQ plus friendly establishments, rainbow flags visible in several windows. Sophie was already there, vibrant as always in a vintage leather jacket, 2 coffees waiting on the table. "Thanks for meeting me," she said as I sat down. "I hope this isn't weird. I just thought we should talk." "About?" I asked, though something in my gut already knew. "About the fact that you're clearly in love with Ethan and doing that thing where you pretend you're not." I nearly choked on my coffee. "I'm not a tie, don't please," she said kindly, but firmly. "I have eyes. And more importantly, I know what it looks like when someone's trying to hide their feelings. I've been there." I slumped in my chair, defeated. Is it that obvious? To me, yes. To Ethan? I'm not sure. He can be surprisingly oblivious about certain things, especially when they involve him personally. "I don't want to make things weird," I said quietly. "He's my roommate and my friend. I don't want to lose that." Sophie reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "I get that. But can I share something with you?" Ethan's last relationship ended about 8 months ago. It was messy. His ex was closeted, couldn't commit, kept Ethan hidden like a secret. It really hurt him. Since then, he's been cautious about dating, about letting anyone get close. I processed this information, my heart aching for what Ethan had been through. It explained some things: his fierce pride in being out, his emphasis on authenticity, the slight wariness I sometimes detected beneath his easy warmth. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because I've seen the way he looks at you too," Sophie said gently. "And I think he might be just as scared as you are." Sophie's words haunted me for days. "I've seen the way he looks at you too." Could it be possible? Did Ethan feel even a fraction of what I felt for him? I started paying attention differently, looking for signs I might have missed. And once I started looking, I saw them everywhere. I thought I did. The way his hand would linger on my shoulder when he passed behind me. How he always saved me the last beer in the fridge even though he could have drunk it himself. The fact that he'd rearranged his work schedule to be home more in the evenings. Claiming he was more productive at night lately. But were these signs of romantic interest? Or was I projecting my hopes onto ordinary friendly gestures? The uncertainty was maddening. One particularly cold October evening, we found ourselves alone in the apartment again. The heating system had been acting up, and the living room was chilly, despite our best efforts. Ethan had built a fire in the decorative fireplace we'd never actually used, and we huddled on the couch under a shared blanket, watching a movie neither of us was really paying attention to. I was acutely aware of every point where our bodies touched his thigh against mine, his arm along the back of the couch, his warmth seeping through the blanket. My heart hammered so loud I was certain he could hear it. "Alex," Ethan said suddenly, his voice cutting through the movie's dialogue. "Yeah. Can I ask you something personal?" My pulse quickened. "Sure." He shifted slightly, turning to look at me more directly. The firelight played across his features, highlighting the serious set of his jaw, the intensity in his eyes. "Are you seeing anyone?" The question caught me off guard. "What? No. Why? You've just seemed distracted lately. And you're on your phone more than usual. I thought maybe—" He trailed off, looking almost embarrassed. "There's no one," I said firmly. "I'm not seeing anyone." Something in his expression relaxed. "Good? I mean not good that you're alone if you don't want to be, but good that it's not. Never mind. What about you?" I asked, emboldened by his question. "Are you seeing anyone?" "No," he said quietly. "I haven't really wanted to. Not for a while." We sat in the charged silence. The movie forgotten, something unspoken stretching between us like a tightrope. "Can I tell you something?" I said, my courage surprising me. "Anything." I took a breath, preparing to maybe, possibly take a leap I couldn't come back from. But before I could speak, his phone rang, loud and jarring in the quiet room. Ethan glanced at the screen and grimaced. "It's my mom." "I should take this. We've been playing phone tag for days." "Of course," I said, trying to hide my disappointment. He squeezed my shoulder as he stood, heading to his room for privacy. I sat there alone, heart still racing, now wondering if I'd just missed a moment or if the interruption had saved me from a terrible mistake. When Ethan emerged 20 minutes later, the mood had shifted. He seemed preoccupied, and I didn't push. We finished the movie in companionable silence, but the earlier tension had dissipated, leaving me wondering what I'd been about to say and whether I'd ever find the courage to say it again. 2 weeks before Halloween, Ethan announced that his design agency was throwing a costume party, and I was his mandatory +1. "You don't have to twist my arm," I said. "I love costume parties, really. I had you pegged as someone who'd consider wearing a name tag that says this is my costume a solid effort." I laughed. "You're not entirely wrong. But I also appreciate the art of a good costume. What are you going as?" He grinned mysteriously. "It's a surprise." "What about you?" "Also a surprise." I decided spontaneously. The next 2 weeks became an unspoken competition of who could create the better costume. While keeping it secret from the other, I caught Ethan hiding shopping bags in his room, and he caught me watching YouTube makeup tutorials with suspicious intensity. The night of the party, I locked myself in the bathroom to get ready, listening to Ethan moving around the apartment doing the same. I'd decided on a fallen angel dark wings I'd crafted from wire and black feathers, artfully torn white shirt, strategic makeup that made me look ethereal and slightly dangerous. It was more effort than I'd put into a costume in years, and I told myself it had nothing to do with wanting to impress Ethan. When I finally emerged, Ethan was in the living room, and the sight of him stopped me in my tracks. He'd gone as a modern interpretation of a Greek god Apollo. I'd guessed from the gold accents and the small lyre prop he carried. He wore all white, the fabric draped in a way that was simultaneously classical and contemporary. His hair styled with gold dust that caught the light. He looked absolutely stunning. "Wow," I breathed. He turned, and his expression when he saw me made my stomach flip. "Alex, you look. Wow." We stood there, staring at each other like teenagers at prom, until I laughed self-consciously. "We clean up pretty well, huh?" "We really do," he agreed, still looking at me with an intensity that made me feel seen in a way I'd never experienced. The party was in a converted warehouse space, decorated with impressive attention to detail. The creative agency had gone all out at atmospheric lighting, a live DJ, a bar serving themed cocktails, and what seemed like hundreds of people in elaborate costumes, Ethan introduced me to his coworkers, and I met the people behind the project, names he'd mentioned over dinners and late-night conversations. Everyone was friendly, welcoming. I found myself actually enjoying the social interaction instead of counting down the minutes until I could leave. But throughout the night, I remained hyper-aware of Ethan, where he was in the room, who he was talking to, the sound of his laugh cutting through the music. Several times I caught him looking at me, and when our eyes met, neither of us looked away immediately. Around midnight, a slow song came on, a rarity at a party like this. Couples drifted to the makeshift dance floor, and I felt someone tap my shoulder. Ethan stood there, hand extended. "Dance with me." My heart lodged in my throat. I'm not a great dancer. Neither am I. We'll be terrible together. I took his hand, and he led me to the floor. His hand settled on my waist, mine on his shoulders, and we swayed to the music. Closer than strictly necessary for a friendly dance. "I'm really glad you came tonight," Ethan said softly, his breath warm against my ear. "Me too. It's been different lately. Happier, maybe. More present." "I stopped running from something," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. His hands tightened slightly on my waist. "What were you running from?" I pulled back just enough to look at him, the question I'd been too scared to ask for months finally finding voice. "What are we doing, Ethan?" His eyes searched mine, vulnerable and open in a way I'd never seen. "I don't know." "What do you want us to be doing?" I started, but before I could finish, someone crashed into us, drunk and apologetic. Shattering the moment, we steadied each other, laughed it off, but the dance ended, and we drifted apart, pulled into separate conversations by other partygoers. But something had fundamentally changed. We'd danced around it for months, but now the question was out there, hanging between us. It's impossible to ignore. We took a rideshare home, sitting in the back seat in charged silence. The driver had the radio on low, some late-night jazz program, and the city lights streaked past the windows in blurs of color. Ethan's hand rested on the seat between us, and I stared at it, at the way his fingers drummed against the leather in a nervous rhythm. I could reach out, close the distance, take his hand. But courage, that had felt possible on the dance floor, seemed to have abandoned me. When we reached our building, we climbed the stairs to our floor without speaking. Ethan fumbled with his keys, the small sound loud in the quiet hallway. Inside, we stood in the living room, costume wings and gold dust, the remnants of the night still clinging to us. "I'll let you get to bed," Ethan said. "But he didn't move toward his room, Ethan," I said. "Yeah. That thing you asked me? At the party? About what I want us to be doing." He turned to face me fully, and I could see his chest rising and falling with quickened breath. "Yeah, I want." I took a breath, steadying myself. "I want to stop pretending. I want to stop acting like this is just friendship when it hasn't felt like just friendship to me in months." The silence that followed felt endless. Ethan stared at me, and I couldn't read his expression. Panic started to set in. I'd misread everything. I'd ruined the best friendship I had. I'd made everything unbearably awkward, and we still had to live together, and thank God, Ethan breathed. And then he was crossing the space between us, his hands coming up to cup my face, his forehead resting against mine. I thought I was going crazy. I thought it was just me. "It's not just you," I whispered. "I've wanted to kiss you for months," he confessed, his thumb brushing my cheekbone. But I was terrified. "You're my roommate, my friend. I didn't want to lose you. You're not going to lose me. I promise." His voice was vulnerable, young, the sound of someone who'd been hurt before and was scared to risk it again. "I promise." He kissed me then, soft and tentative at first, a question more than a statement. I answered by pulling him closer, my hands sliding into his hair, deepening the kiss until it became something more certain, more urgent. He tasted like the craft cocktails from the party and something uniquely him. And I knew instantly that I'd never get enough of this. We broke apart, breathing hard, foreheads still pressed together. "I should tell you," Ethan said. "I've been half in love with you since the day you moved in." My heart soared. "Only half?" He laughed, the sound full of joy. Okay, maybe more than half. Maybe completely. Maybe terrifyingly, overwhelmingly in love with you. Good, I said, kissing him again. Because I'm terrifyingly, overwhelmingly in love with you too. We stood there in our living room, still in our costumes, kissing like we'd been doing it forever and like we might never get another chance. Time lost meaning. The world narrowed to just this, his hands on my waist, my fingers in his hair, the taste of his smile against my lips. Eventually, we migrated to the couch, unwilling to separate even for the walk to either of our bedrooms. We talked for hours, making up for months of things unsaid. He told me about the exact moment he knew he was falling for me, the night of the burnt garlic bread. When I'd laughed, despite having a terrible day, when I'd chosen to stay and talk instead of hiding in my room, I told him about watching him play guitar, about the way my stomach flipped when he smiled, about every small moment that had built into this overwhelming feeling. What do we do now? I asked as dawn started to lighten the windows. We figure it out, Ethan said simply. Together? We take it one day at a time. We're already living together, which means we get to skip all the hard parts of early relationship logistics. I laughed. Or we get all the hard parts condensed. What if this doesn't work? What if we try and it ruins everything? What if we try and it's the best thing that ever happened to us? He countered, pulling me closer. I'd rather risk it and know than spend the rest of my life wondering what if. He was right. We'd already crossed the line. The only way forward was together. As the sun rose over the city, painting our living room in shades of pink and gold, I fell asleep on the couch in Ethan's arms, feeling safer and more hopeful than I had in years. The next few weeks were a crash course in navigating a relationship with someone you already lived with. There were challenges learning to balance couple time with personal space, figuring out how to argue when you couldn't just go home to cool off, dealing with the weird domestic intimacy of seeing each other first thing in the morning and last thing at night. But there were also unexpected joys. Waking up in his bed, sheets tangled around us, sunlight streaming through the window, cooking dinner together, stealing kisses between chopping vegetables, the casual intimacy of his hand finding mine while we watched movies. Like it was the most natural thing in the world, we told his friends first. Sophie, predictably, claimed she'd known all along and deserved credit as matchmaker, even though she'd technically just given me a push in the right direction. Marcus and James threw us a celebratory dinner, toasting to roommates, to soulmates. Diego captured candid moments of us throughout the evening, later sending us photos that showed two people clearly, obviously in love. Coming out to my family as being in a relationship with my male roommate was simultaneously easier and harder than my initial coming out. My mother cried, but this time with happiness. My father awkwardly asked if Ethan made me happy, and when I said yes, he simply nodded and said that was all that mattered. My younger sister demanded to meet him immediately, claiming she needed to vet anyone who wanted to date her brother. Ethan met my family on Thanksgiving. I was nervous they could be overwhelming, loving, but loud, with opinions about everything. But Ethan charmed them effortlessly, helping my mother in the kitchen, talking sports with my father, making my sister laugh with his self-deprecating humor, watching him in my childhood home, fitting seamlessly into the chaotic warmth of my family. I felt my love for him deepen into something that felt permanent, foundational. Your family's great, he said on the drive home, my hand in his on the console between us. They love you. I love them. And I love you, he said it casually, the way he did now, like it was simply a fact. As fundamental as gravity? I love you too, I replied, never getting tired of saying it. Of hearing it, December arrived with the first snow blanketing the city in white. Ethan and I walked through the park near our apartment, hands intertwined, breath misting in the cold air. We'd been officially together for 2 months, but it felt both longer and shorter longer because it felt like we'd always been together. Shorter because I couldn't imagine ever getting enough of this. Move in with me, Ethan said suddenly. I laughed. I already live with you. I mean, move into my room. Officially, we can turn your room into a home office for you. Or a library. God knows you have enough books. I stopped walking, turning to face him. Snow caught in his hair, on his eyelashes, and he looked like something out of a winter fairy tale. "Are you sure?" I asked. "That's a big step. Alex, I've been sure about you since you moved in with 2 suitcases and looked at that empty bedroom like it was the answer to every question you'd ever asked. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want this to be our home, not just the place where we live together." I kissed him, there in the snow, in the middle of the park, not caring who saw. Yes, absolutely yes. Moving into Ethan's room was both monumental and simple. It meant combining our things, making space for each other in drawers and closets. It meant inside jokes and shared rituals. It meant choosing us over me. Every single day we converted my old bedroom into a combination office and library, lining the walls with bookshelves and setting up desks by the window. It became our creative sanctuary, me writing and editing, Ethan designing. Working side by side in comfortable silence, broken only by the occasional question or kiss. Valentine's Day came, our first as an official couple. Ethan surprised me by recreating our first date, which, we decided in retrospect, had been the night of the burnt garlic bread. He cooked pasta again, and this time, the garlic bread came out perfectly golden. "I've been practicing," he admitted sheepishly. "I wanted to get it right this time." We ate by candlelight, the same playlist from that first night playing softly in the background. After dinner, he handed me a small box. Inside was a key. "It's symbolic," he explained. "You already have a key to the apartment, obviously, but this one is for you to keep. A reminder that you'll always have a place here. With me. Home." I kissed him, tasting the salt of my own tears. "I got you something, too." I presented him with a framed photograph Diego had taken at the costume party, the 2 of us on the dance floor. Lost in our own world, the exact moment before everything changed. Beneath the photo, I'd written a quote from one of my favorite books. "In vain have I struggled. It will not do. My feelings will not be repressed." Ethan's eyes shone. "It's perfect." "You're perfect. I'm really not." "Perfect for me, then." Not everything was fairy tale perfect. In March, I received a job offer from a prestigious publishing house in another city. It was my dream job, the kind of opportunity that could make my career. It was also 1,000 miles away. I agonized over it for days before telling Ethan, terrified of how the conversation would go. We'd only been together for 6 months. Could I ask him to uproot his life for me? Should I? When I finally confessed, Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "What do you want to do?" he asked finally. "I want the job," I admitted. "But I want you more. And I don't know how to have both." He took my hands in his. "Here's what I know. You deserve that job. You've worked incredibly hard, and you're talented, and they'd be lucky to have you. And I love you enough to figure out how to make this work, whatever that looks like. You'd really consider moving?" I asked, hardly daring to hope. "I'd really consider it," he confirmed. "I'm a graphic designer. I can work anywhere. But more than that, I want to be where you are. You're my home, Alex, not this apartment. You." We spent the next week researching the city, looking at apartments, talking to his agency about remote work possibilities. It was scary and exciting in equal measure, starting over together in a new place, building a life from scratch. In the end, I turned down the job. Not because Ethan asked me to, but because I realized that my dream wasn't about a specific job or city. My dream was building a life I loved, with someone I loved. And I already had that here. But the fact that Ethan had been willing to move, willing to sacrifice his comfort for my dreams, told me everything I needed to know about the man I'd fallen in love with. Our 1-year anniversary arrived on a crisp autumn day that mirrored the weather from when I'd first moved in. We'd made reservations at a nice restaurant, planned a whole evening out, but when the day came, we decided to stay in instead. We cooked together Ethan's improved pasta and his now famous garlic bread, me contributing a salad and dessert from the bakery down the street. We ate at our coffee table, the same place we'd shared Chinese takeout on my first night, and talked about everything and nothing. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day?" I asked. "When you opened the door?" "Welcome home," Ethan recalled, smiling. "I remember thinking you looked terrified and trying to sound as non-threatening as possible. I was terrified. New city, new job, new roommate. I had no idea what I was walking into. And now? I looked around our apartment, truly our apartment now, filled with both our things, our memories, our life. I looked at Ethan, at this man who'd become my best friend, my partner, my home. Now I know exactly where I belong. He kissed me, soft and sweet. I have something for you.